So welcome to the Imperial Science Cafe. This evening, we are handing over the platform for a very special event. Tonight, the People Like You research team are here to launch Written Portraits, a book of poems written by Di Sherlock about some very special people here at Imperial. We will start with a few introductions. The introductions will be followed by a poetry reading of a selection of poems from the book. At the end, you will be guided to the People Like You webpage, where you will find more information about the project and the poems from the book. So without further delay, I would like to introduce Professor Sophie Day, co-founder of the Imperial Patient Experience Research Center and a lead researcher of the People Like You project. Sophie?
Thank you, Kelly. It's a really great pleasure to welcome you all. I've worked both with Kelly and with Di in our project on personalization and learned a good deal from both. Di is an actor, a director, and a writer, and she's produced written portraits in a residency at Maggie's, West London, and Charing Cross Hospital, as well as some other sites associated with the university. So Di, welcome.
Thank you.
What's a written portrait?
Right, well, a written portrait is a portrait in words as opposed to a portrait in paint. And it's something that I developed when I was asked to come up with a way of engaging with people living with dementia and basically honoring their stories. It was a bit suck it and see at that point, but it was successful in that it got people really engaged and was a really lovely project. Clearly, it was very different at Charing Cross and Maggie's, but the structure of it is the same, and that is, first of all, there's the conversation where I encourage my sitter to do the talking, and I listen and I take notes because I don't use a recorder. And in this case, it was mainly you, Kelly, that got me sittings with the staff, which lasted between about 30 or 45 minutes if I was lucky. And the people at Maggie's, it was a little bit more fluid and flexible, although it could be disruptive because we never knew exactly what was going to happen. And sometimes I got one sitting and sometimes I got several sittings. So the actual portrait matured or got written over 6 weeks when I got enough bits and pieces of the conversations. So then the second part is, of course, the writing. And then the third part is giving back the portrait to the sitter, the person I've been having the conversation with. And they have an opportunity then to feed back. And I ask them if I've got the facts right, which I don't always. And then if they're uncomfortable with anything, like sometimes a reference might be too personal, or sometimes an image doesn't sit quite right with them. And sometimes something's missing. They feel that they need to include more or drill down into something or amplify and elaborate on something that's already in there but isn't fully expressed. So then I go away and rework it, give it them back. We discuss it again. If they're happy, fine. If not, I tweak it again until both parties, both they and I, are happy with it as a portrait.
So in a sense, the portrait is a likeness. It's like the person, but it's also not finished until everybody likes it.
Yes, that's right. And generally, it doesn't take more than a couple of goes to get the portrait, but sometimes it can extend. And as I get to know people more and the conversation develops, the question then is to say, right, I think all even painters have this portrait is now finished. But you're right, we have to like it and we have to feel that it is like that person. Absolutely.
Well, that's a very good introduction to the first two portraits.
Yeah. I mean, I think really that's a process. So let's have a look at or a listen to the first poem. So that's Clive. And the poem that Clive's going to read was inspired by conversation with one of the hospital staff. And it's called Vital Conversation.
He's a registrar, oncology registrar, used to people not understanding or misunderstanding what that is. People don't realize registrars are doctors. Often they may be the one who's doing the op, with the consultant standing by. He talks with an ease others have to work at, a love of life wanting conversation. As an Oxford undergrad studying plant biology, he soon realizes loving plants is very different from researching them. They don't talk back to you. And so, dismissing a life in the lab, he considers his options, teaching or medicine. He knows he'll make a rubbish GP, but he chooses medicine, looking to stretch his brain with cellular genetics. The medical profession teaches you life is fragile, he observes, but he's not one to pass up a challenge. Swims with manta rays in Fiji, escapes near death on a dodgy bike in Bolivia, and does a 300-mile bike ride from Leicester to the Peak District to fundraise for his PhD benefactors. 4 days in perfect weather and lycra. But perhaps his biggest challenge comes when his dad is diagnosed with kidney cancer. A Birmingham man with a rare master's in soldering and management who turns around the failing Lucas factory. The father's admitted to the QE, one of the 3 hospitals where his son's doing his medical training. Mercifully, the son at Wolverhampton is spared the father's journey. If you can't do the on-off switch with the emotions, you do pathology, he asserts. But later, when a woman with kidney cancer is treated with immunotherapy and gets the all clear, his father's ghost rises up to meet him. For a moment, the bright notes, glad as a Vivaldi Gloria, are muted. Before he died, his father made him promise to travel once he'd finished. Know the later flowering wanderlust that took him in early retirement to Kilimanjaro and the Inca Trail. Brightness returns as he tells me what happens next. 6 months later, he slips on the ice carrying lumbar puncture fluid. Holding the precious cargo aloft, he goes down and thinks, there's more to life than this. He swaps Brum for Taronga and relocates to the north coast of the North Island, as close to the Riviera as New Zealand gets. He has friends and colleagues, loves the food, the Pacific quiet. But when his sister has a baby, he comes home, drops anchor. Anchors are important. I like having family and friends, he says. Keeps up with the old school pals from Camp Hill days. True to his promise, he's travelled, loves it. Peru and Bolivia, Uganda, Rwanda, Kenya, Australia, Fiji, Southeast Asia, Europe, a charted territory. But sooner or later, he returns to port. Birmingham and London, twin immutables by which he sets his compass. In his dad's factory, he stripped down 40 units for South American travels. Now, oncology is the goal. I have a plan, he says, the gaze sure. Once, on an allotment in Birmingham, a mother, a father, and a son build a hive together, enjoy Birmingham honey. Now the swarm, the father are gone, but the mother remains active in her care for the environment, while in the hive of cancer genetics, the son engages in a conversation vital to life as bees and buzzing.
Thanks, Clive. Thank you. The next poem we're going to hear is going to be read by Lin. Hello, Lin. If we can
Hi there.
You, please. Hi there. We see you now, Lin. And this is actually part of a longer poem, a group poem that was inspired by the art class at Maggie's. Lin actually was a member of the art class herself, and she became a sitter of mine, and she's got her own poem. But this particular poem is of another woman who I talked to and who was painting a collage, or actually making a collage, and it's called Rewilding the Self.
This is no simple collage. The cut-up is a snapshot in time. The cards of well-wishers, friends and family, some no longer here. She has no plan, no outcome in mind, is just going to see where it ends up. In this, she echoes certain contemporary artists. I fall into the fast flow of conversation. The Celtic features morph, Vermeer, Dürer, Modigliani. She documents her diagnosis and treatment. Dates, procedures, fly like arrows fletched with social and political thinking, born of experience, not spreadsheets. The cancer was self-diagnosed. She knew nothing of the silent killer, knew only that despite the healthy lifestyle and appetite with which her family is blessed, she couldn't eat so much. Lucky for her, she has a GP who can read the symptoms and acts. She details the dark history of women's healthcare in the hands of male practitioners. Women don't understand this, she explains. She's for education, empowerment. Again, she enters the room where she received her diagnosis. The male consultant and female clinical nurse specialist are there. But her chair is positioned so her back is to the nurse. She turns the chair round. Now both are present. You have to speak up. Censure turns to gratitude, remembrance that extends beyond our conversation. In diagnosis, treatment, and recovery, she feels part of a superorganism of love, care, kindness, thoughts and prayers, friends and family, friends of friends, and family of friends. In fact, there were a lot of people I didn't know praying for me. There are gifts of time and conversation, a wealth of things, flowers, toiletries, biscuits, chocolates, a homemade crocheted blanket, a NutriBullet, slippers. She recalls the brother who's there post-diagnosis when her brain cuts out in Liverpool Street Station, the gracious support of work colleagues and the NHS, which gave her, she says, phenomenal care. She gives thanks to the surgeon who gives her his mobile number and speaks to her dad, and the hospital staff from across the globe who give kindness and professionalism and persist in a thankless world of neoliberal values. And throughout, with a front row seat, her remarkable parents, whose duty of care is sublime, surrender unconditional. It was the best and the worst of times, she says, without irony. She's turned 50, but doesn't look it. Good genes, she laughs. But the birthday was the trigger. There's nothing there now. The conversation eddies, turns. The moss green ankle boots insinuate woods, earth. She knows the ways of flowers, the needs of bees, a tree's quest for light and air, ecosystems and the cost of human meddling. We just need to step back. We don't need to over-engineer things. The commitment of young people to the planet, our urge to rewild ourselves, bring hope. As a community gardener, she teaches a reluctant walker on sticks plant identification. Now she walks more, noticing what's around her. It's changed the way I look at the world, the old lady says. She's chuffed. Her favourite tree is the apple. Pruning the family trees with her dad is a ritual. Why the apple? It's beautiful and useful, is the reply. She knows how to be both.
Thank you so much, Lynn.
You're welcome.
I'd like to show you all how you can find the poems online, if you'd like to, by sharing my screen briefly. I'll see if I can do this. Firstly, while I do so, I'd like to thank all the participants in these, in the residency for sharing their poems with us and agreeing that we can put them in the book and on the web. And this is our project. It's called People Like You. And you'll see a little button here which says poems. And here's a brief description, but I'll just show you the buttons. They should be fairly intuitive. You can listen to the poems here, or you can read and listen. So if we go to one of the poems we've just heard, let's see, here's Vital Conversation, which we heard first. The poem is written down here with the odd illustration. And at the top here, you can listen to it. And then if you're interested, you could read what Di and I distilled from a good many conversations into a little bit of background and some of the themes that came out. So with Vital Conversation, this first paragraph here shows how Di and her sitter found that they had a shared history in Birmingham. And in the second paragraph, we're bringing out themes that were important in Di's own work and to the larger project. In this case, it's how staff managed to combine and separate their professional and personal lives. And then they're different for each poem, but here we have the sitter emailing Di after he receives his poem saying, "Loved it, Diane. Wouldn't change a word. Longer than I thought it would be." So there's a button to come back to the poem up here, and you can either go on to the next or back to the beginning. So that's one way to browse. And then if you'd like to download the book as a PDF, you can do it on this button. It will be available in hard copy, but several people have asked us how they can buy the book. And the short answer is you can't, because the Wellcome Trust has very generously supported our work. So what we've done is we've put in the credits, if anyone should want to, 2 links where you can make donations if you want to. One is to Maggie's Cancer Centres, and the other is to Imperial Health Charity. And that's largely in recognition of the support and hospitality from Charing Cross Hospital and Maggie's West London. So that is really all I need to show you from the screen. But I'd like to encourage you, if you have any comments or questions, feel free to use the Q&A button as we listen to another poem, which Di will introduce now.
This is a poem that was inspired by several conversations with 2 of the men that belonged to the men's group at Maggie's. And the men's group at Maggie's would colonize the kitchen table certain times of the day and certain days of the week. And these 2 men in particular caught my attention, and they were up for a conversation. And in fact, these conversations went over 6 weeks. And and Chris is now Chris Barnes. We have Chris. Okay. Chris is going to read The 3 Musketeers.
The 3 Musketeers. they say. But only 2 are in service round the table. Diagnosed at the same time, they're old sparring partners since Dave jumped the biopsy queue. I didn't only say oi, says Ray. Now I can't get rid of him. He gives Dave an almighty squeeze on the kneecap that prompts a yelp worthy of Beaky, Dave's greyhound, an old racer. Called Beaky because of his big beak, says Dave, tracing the muzzle in the air. Always tells it like it is. With tattoos and grins piratical, they're like a couple of old-time comedians, always quick off the mark with ready wit and repartee. They weren't always. Gray was a bag of nerves when he came in, says Dave. This place lifts you. Ray, snaffling Dave's cake, nods. One thing they can agree on. Outside, the Nordic walkers limber up. The leader checks in. Some are sore, some ache. One says she's always under the weather. The naming round the circle falls apart. Never works, the leader laughs. Ray joins them. But Dave's grounded with a broken rib since Beaky pulled him over. Oh, the sod. Would have to be the side I lie on. A cloud of histamine descends from the sweaty London sky, swallows the walkers. Dave remains in the chair that's got his name on it. His granddad was a miner from Matlock, and then the family moved to Shepherd's Bush. All rank QPR supporters now, save one brother, a Spurs fan. An outcast, he snorts. The family took him down since he was 5. On match days, he gets fish and chips on the way, pie and mash with gravy after. Beaky gets his share. He's not a fussy eater. He even likes a bit of curry, Chinese as well, but you won't get him on a bus. He goes in a taxi, though. A luxury breed. He talks of greyhounds past their use-by date, dumped like garbage. The eyes that, like a bit of fun, grow luminous. Behind the banter, the chiaroscuro of the soul. The conversation turns to abseiling. Well, several have signed up. Not him, not since he took a nasty tumble from the top of the ladder he didn't tie off. Dismissing the Spiderman, he talks of music back in the day. Marty Wilde, Joe Brown, and a glint in his eye, Marianne Faithfull. Be very careful, dear, says St. Peter, leaning in. He's trouble. There's a diamond wink from the earring he's worn since he was a rocker. What you are, he says with an impish grin, ain't ya? Ray was a mod, suited and booted, wore a parka, not a leather jacket, like Dave, who once brought a parka by mistake. Listened to The Who, local to where he grew up in Shepherd's Bush, though there's some debate whether they were mods. Well, what about the Stones? Mods or rockers? Now, the Moody Blues, no question there. He was the youngest of 5. Remembers his mum, the jobs she had to take to keep them when his dad passed at 51. We were poor, but we had good dinners. On a Sunday, the Winkle man had come round with his barrow or his van. They'd go down the road to the neighbours to watch telly. They were good days. But not without their ups and downs. Ray gets in a bit of trouble. His dad has a word, and the boy goes down the Gold Hawk Social, puts on the gloves. For 3 years he trains, loves it, but was never no good. Not like his brother, who showed promise and could kick a ball too. He tried for QPR and got in, but when their dad passed, a Brentford supporter, he changed his strip. He could have been a contender, Ray muses, but he discovered women. A memento of his old sparring days gleams on a chain round his neck, given to him by his son. He's got memorabilia from Nigel, Ben, Chris, Eubank, also presents from his son, who he doubts knows what else to get him. The ghost of the young pugilist darts across the solid features, softened by life and time. The jab, friendly handshake now. The hook, a good-natured jibe. You can take the dog out of a fight, but you can't take the fight out of the dog. He got his diagnosis the day he retired. Went for a test because he happened to be watching telly and saw Bob Monkhouse in a Macmillan ad. Like Dave, who went in with a sore throat to find the problem was with the lower works. It's a bolt out of the blue. It was the gym that got into Maggie's. Wasn't interested to begin with. Well, it's getting on 5 years now. The people who work here are diamond. When he lost his second sister, he took it really bad. He looks at Dave, working on his art, it being Friday, reflective. He livened me up. The busy colouring pencil stops. Quickly, he redresses the balance, tells how Dave phoned him up beside himself when his dog died. He went round and carried the beloved lurcher who died on Dave's bed down the stairs. An act of camaraderie to be expected from an inseparable. The missing musketeer, Andreas, is known for his paella and mean patatas bravas, but he's not eating. He's not all that clever, says Dave. Time passes. Andreas is not mentioned. When I ask, fearing the worst, Ray lights up. Oh, he's sounding perky, bright as anything. He hadn't seen him, just talked. Andreas says the food's not bad at all in the care home. But then it's all changed. Andreas wasn't eating after all, just said so to please his sister. Ray goes to visit, sees him take 3 spoons of soup and wave the dinner away. He's brought Diet Coke, but there's no fridge in the room, so Andreas drinks half, leaves the rest. He won't drink it warm. He hates it there. But they won't move him now. He's dying, says Ray. The words settle on the air. Nowhere to go. In Margravine Cemetery, long fingers of elder bow to the earth, beckon the silence. The third musketeer passes on a full moon in partial eclipse.
Thank you. I'd like us to have a little pause to take some questions and have a bit of discussion before we carry on with another poem. So we have some on Q&A, and I have one to start with, which is that Di's told us a little bit about the conversation she's had and what it's like being a writer and crafting a poem from these conversations. And there's a question, what's it like being a sitter? And we have, I know, 3 sitters here who may or may not all want to be visible. There's Lynn, who I can see, and Sanella and Suzanne. And it would be great to hear from you or to compare notes among you. Lynn, would you like to start while the others find their video and mute buttons or whichever they do?
I had a really good time chatting to Di. I mean, it was from the start, it was a great experience because she and I have theatre in common, and so we quickly fell into a kind of common parlance, and took to each other really well. Like most actors anyway, I really like talking about myself. So it was great. And I was, no, truly, I was very honoured and I was very flattered. Nobody's ever written anything about me in that way before. So it was also quite interesting to see what she'd decided to use of our conversation, because we spoke for quite a long time.
Mm. Yeah, I have to say, Lynn, you are the scariest of my sitters.
Oh God, why?
Because you are an actor and writer yourself of no mean merit. And I do recall our conversations left the substance about your journey and everything and really got into the imagery and style. And it was like a couple of, old literati pouring over the poem. Very different with you.
No, it was great. And it was, I mean, you were very generous, Di, about feedback that I had, because I'm a picky so-and-so because I'm a writer. But it was great because, I've learned over a long time that if a writer says, no, it's fine, just tell me what you think. No, really be honest. Most of them don't mean it. But Di, as I say, was very generous in her taking of any comments that I mean, I don't mean that I tore it to shreds at all. I was delighted with it. And as I say, very honoured, but it there were 1 or 2 little points, and it was great. It felt like a real collaboration in that respect.
Bit of to and fro there. Sanella, I think you were the very first portrait, or part of the very first portrait that was composed.
So I was part of a team that worked at Charing Cross, Kelly's team, and all the lovely patients and the rest of the staff that feature. What I found was it was a surprise. I don't think that either of us expected. To be honest, we didn't really understand the meaning of written portrait. Di walked in and just worked the room like nobody, and it was a beautiful experience. It was emotional. She can vouch for all the separate conversations we had, because there was, it was very raw, it was very real, and we did touch upon some pretty personal stuff as well. She used her intuition beautifully. It was really, really interesting to observe that. And the way she pulled the information based on the interviews was just magnificent. I thoroughly enjoyed the experience, despite of the tears afterwards, which she knows about. Yes, and the book, Di, when you sent me the printed copy, it is one of my most precious possessions right now. So thank you for that.
Well, thank you, Sanella. Thank you.
Suzanne, tell us what it was like.
When I read the first draft, I was quite amazed at the detail, and not just references to my words, but also my gestures and expressions. Indeed, even more, I felt Di had perceived aspects of my inner self. I had been listened to and also, to be honest, affirmed. And it's true to say I've come to understand a bit more about myself. And I'd also like to thank you, Di, for the fact that I got to know you a bit as well. Thank you.
Oh, well, you taught me a few things yourself, Suzanne. Suzanne and I's conversation, we had a conversation that went for about 3.5 hours, I think. And then we had a little bit of toing and fro, because I think your sister got involved as well, didn't she?
Yeah.
So it's very important that well, when people share their portrait with their relatives or friends, and we have that input, that gets put in the mix, and then that gets discussed as well. Whether you thrash it out with your sister or whether we, so clearly I didn't meet your sister, but I respected what she had to say, and
Thank you.
Thank you.
You may want to stay on, you three, because some of the questions we've received are for you as much as for anyone else. So in a sense, it seems to me that you've answered one of the questions, which is to say a little bit more about what it means to honor your sitters by giving the poem back.
Yeah, okay, so I think generally I have the impression that when a painter paints a picture, gets commissioned to paint a portrait, they paint the portrait and the sitter doesn't then get up and say, no, actually, I don't like this, will you paint it again? They either get paid and the portrait goes on the wall or not. In my case, it's very different because I feel that I'm witnessing a journey, I'm seeing a journey, I'm witnessing that person telling their journey. It's a very exquisitely intense process of listening all through my body. It isn't just with my ears, but it's also looking at their, feeling their energy and all that kind of thing. And when I've written it, we co-own it, in the sense that it is their story, it is their journey. I've shaped that, and there is a negotiation, and a negotiation that has to happen there for me, because if they're not happy with what I've written, what's the point? Let's unpack that and let's dig down and find out what it is that's not sitting well, because that to me, would have no point at all. It's about honoring that person, honoring that self, that person, that journey that they've made, and they have to like it and relate to it, and it has to resonate with them. Otherwise, it's empty. What is it? But something to put in a book. That's of no interest to me.
And as we've heard, that can take a little bit of negotiation with other people who might figure in the poem, or with something being a bit too personal, if it's especially from the Charing Cross side, and a bit too impersonal if it's from the Maggie's West side. So it's a process. And there's a related question from a member of the audience saying how much they love the portraits, but they were wondering about the anonymity of the sitters. Seeing as the sitters collaborate so wholeheartedly in the process, did you consider offering them co-authorship or the option to be identified with their stories?
I think that's a question for you and me, Sophie. I think I've kind of answered it in the last one when I talked about co-ownership rather than co-authorship. Well, you could argue that, a person's the agent of their own story, metaphysically fine. But I think there is a sense for me that there is a co-ownership of what has been produced. In terms of anonymity, I hand that over to you.
Yes, I think it's a really important distinction, co-ownership and authorship, because ownership includes many variations of access to, or belonging in, or being included in, or being recognized, whereas Di was the author, and if you look at the poems online or in the book, you'll see that where something appears verbatim, it's quoted as verbatim. And of course, Di has as an author, you are in some ways accountable to or responsible for what you've written, which is why I feel that that's a helpful distinction. As far as the anonymity is concerned, the people you see before you are people who didn't want to stay anonymous, but many people, not many, some people did not want to be identified, and some people did. So we've tried to be respectful of anybody who didn't use their, who didn't give explicit permission for their name to be used in identifying their particular poem. So that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, there was
the third one I have, which is kind of digging into this honouring and ownership a little bit further. What happens when there is when the liking and the likeness don't match?
the liking and the likeness.
So if there's a portrait, i.e. a resemblance to a particular person, and the person doesn't like it, they may recognize the resemblance without liking the portrait.
That hasn't happened. I think mercifully it hasn't happened, and should it happen, then I'd accept that. I go, okay, that's a dud. But it hasn't happened in all the time that I've been doing this, including with people living with Alzheimer's and dementia, and also working with people in daycare centres, and also working at Glyndebourne, believe it or not, with the invisible people behind the scenes that do the catering and the gardening and, all the unseen, unheard voices. In all that time, thank heavens, I've never had that experience. But yeah, I just consider it a dud. She'd have to paint over the canvas. Forget it.
Well, perhaps that's speaking to your skill. Now we've got time for one or two more. Here's one which says, often with a painting, it's said that the painter is always painting themselves. How true do you find this is with the written portrait?
Obliquely, no doubt. But the only time that I've felt a kind of epiphany where I saw myself in a poem was in fact in Suzanne's poem, which is the only poem, Per Ardua ad Astra, where I include myself at the end of the poem and the actual writing of the poem in Regent's Park, and how that writing that poem got me to meditate on the process of writing the poem, and also on the relationship between me and the sitter as a kind of moving meditation in and out of darkness and light. Otherwise, what happens, and I can't explain this, is I get out of the way, and that's mainly, I think, because I take notes. I don't record, so it's not like I'm sitting staring at the person and the recorder's going on, like, and I've got this endless stream to sift through afterwards. I'm just watching and listening all the way through, and I think the concentration of that takes me out of myself during the process. Clearly, stylistically, there are things that I favour, which is, as much as possible, simplicity, simplicity, and that isn't an easy thing to achieve, because overwriting, as Lin will probably back me up on this, is something we all do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I hope I've got most of the questions in for now, but I just want to close this bit with a comment from somebody who says, Di is a very good listener and observer, and held a mirror to me that allowed me to see myself perhaps as others do, and not as I had imagined myself. Oddly enough, I'd missed out the cancer bit, even though it has profoundly changed the way I experience the world. And it is very interesting how some of the poems mention cancer and some of them don't, but that you get a sense of what's not said as well as what is said, or what's not a focus of conversation.
I think there's, for me, always a very exquisite and moving moment when I give a poem back and it totally resonates, and that person, for whatever reasons, bursts into tears. And for me, that recognition, but at the same time, distanced recognition of their journey that brings in almost what I call self-compassion, but it's certainly not pity, is something which is very beautiful to see. So, I mean, I thank all my sitters for that. You know, of course, we did go backwards and forwards a bit, and not everybody burst into tears, but those moments are very precious. And I feel that it's been useful, because that's what it's about, being useful.
Thank you, Di. I think we have time for one more reading.
I hope so. And this is Susan. Please come on board. And thank you for waiting so long. Yeah, Susan is going to read one of the hospital portraits, which is called Everyday Heroines.
You get hit, she says. When you ask, how are you? And they've had bad news. Sometimes they cry in front of you. She's been working in Clinic 8 for 2 years now, taking patients' blood, urine, calling them to the consultant. The stories you hear makes you think, what would I do? She holds me with her strong gaze, warm, generous, rooted in earth. Say simply, you cannot be working and crying every day. You will cry forever. She's learned resilience in palliative care at St. Charles's and pregnant with her son, caring for her mother when she's diagnosed with cancer. If you are not strong enough inside, you will break down, she says firmly. But still, those who face their mortality with no family around them pierce the vital armor. She says, sometimes we cry. The blunt truth, the blow I don't see coming. It is her mother who encourages her to do nursing, tells her she has the power to intercede on the patient's behalf, give voice to the voiceless. There's nothing you can't do, she insists. You can do it, echoes her dad. She wanted to wait till the children were older and chooses to do health and social care level 5 over 2 years because she has a job and a house to run. She's almost finished. It's all to do with management, she smiles. Prepares her children in advance so they can prepare themselves. They wash the dishes, hoover, but mealtimes are golden. It's important that I cook for them. Jollof rice is a favorite. Even her veggie-hating boy can be tricked into munching plant life when it's hidden in the dish. Frying is out, but she understands their palate is different and will change. Once in a while, they can have McDonald's, she grins. Every year, she takes them to Paris, where her father, a high-ranking army officer, once made the family home. In his retirement, he's gone back to Ghana, does his best to lure them over. She speaks English, French, and thanks to him, a bit of dialect from all over Ghana. I've been places. The Ashanti ancestry shines in her fine bones, the elegant weave sculpting her head in the likeness of a goddess. I am in awe. I have a good hairdresser, she laughs. There are 6 of them on the team, with 2 nurses and a manager. One of the team, Marcia, whose picture looms large in the corridor, brought in a banana cake to share with staff and patients. Unwittingly, I met Marcia looking for Florence, who was on lunch break. She asked me my business and, satisfied I had good cause, instructed me to sit and wait. Not wanting to cut short a lunch break, I protested. And then I did as I was told. She laughs when I tell her this. Marcia, she says, cannot tolerate nonsense. If you offend her, you deal with it straight away. Patients need to see us working together, free spirits moving around. Nursing is in the blood. She was named after her dad's auntie, a nurse in Ghana, their namesake, an icon of the nursing profession. Her elder sister is a community nurse. They do not share the status of the lady with the lamp, yet follow her dictate of hard work, their acts of compassion unsung. They are like many others who answer the call, everyday heroines.
Thank you, Susan.
We're just about out of time, so I would like to thank all of you for reading the poems, and Kelly and Di for being inspirational, and all the sitters, and all of you who've come to listen to us.
Yeah,
thank you so much, and I hope you enjoy browsing more poems on the website, or we can get the book to you. And have a very good evening.